So the question of today is, do you have empathy for refugee?
In your life, if you see a person in trouble,
Yes, it
you
falls
might
on
be
you
able to
to
do
help.
something
Yes,
about
right.
them. But if you see a
100,
million
yeah.
people in trouble,
Yeah.
what you should probably do, at least to begin with, is run.
Yeah.
And I mean, what are you going to do? Maybe you
I
could
get
give
it.
$1,000 to one person, but if you divided that up among a million, all that would happen would you would have no money, and they wouldn't be any better off.
Yeah.
But this is to say that so much of moral progress today entails unhooking from the highly salient empathy-driving story and connecting with the actual quantitative reality, to learn that it's 500,000 people dying every year from heart disease or whatever it is, or there's 500,000 people dying in this famine. Mm-hmm. The fact that can't be made sexy for our news cycle, right? The fact that we lose attention is something we have to figure out how to correct.
Well, it's also akin, it's very interestingly akin to your objection that you raised before, is that there are adult forms of solving problems that aren't akin to children's play, which is something, by the way, I agree with, because I don't think that the manner in which children organize the world is the end of the way that things should be organized. It's the basis for some of the organization. But this is akin to the same issue, is that the basal motivational responses, the emotional responses, no matter how well-meaning, aren't of sufficient conceptual sophistication to deal with incredibly elaborate and complex systems.
True.
And then you have another problem too, is that, well, that's really troublesome for people because they want to do the right thing globally. And then you tell them, look, you don't know anything.
Yes.
You don't know how to take this insanely complicated system that we have and improve it.
I've been calling this out so many times. It's like they don't really care. They're like, you know what? I have a feeling, it's a good feeling, I want to help a bunch of people, it's so difficult, but I want to do it the best way and I want people to notice. The fact that we have right now a bunch of people getting coffee from the police blocking the street for Palestine.
He left, no one told him they can't come back, otherwise he would have said, okay, I understand.
Okay, I'll just ask, just so... Sorry, it's the person with the vest?
Jihad? Yeah, straight at him. Yeah, and then the guy, the guy in the yellow vest on the bottom.
How did you get coffee from the police?
Well, not the police. Someone has brought it for us, but the police won't let them in. So the police is now becoming our little messengers between us. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on.
All I want to say is this. That's not how they treated the Canadian people that were protesting a few years back. They had horses, kata-crash on them to show them they're right.
Kevin, improve it. And just because you're feeling pity doesn't mean that you're an expert in the retooling of hydroelectric systems, for example.
And there's one straightforward way to do that. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a brilliant Kurdish demographer who's a Swedish citizen now, who cited this fact that it costs the same amount to bring one refugee and keep them in Sweden as it does to look after 100 refugees in Jordan, Turkey, or Lebanon. Okay.
Wow.
So the obvious thing from that is you say, look, it's madness then to be, for instance, bringing in thousands of refugees to Sweden. You could be looking after hundreds of thousands of people in the region. Why is that still a tainted argument? It's because people aren't sure you're not going to smuggle in racism with that. That's why. I think, are you sure you're not just coming up with this demographer stuff in order to...
It's like you're smuggling.
I can understand why you want to send money over there, but the idea that you're like, come over here, and usually you don't get the family, you get young men. I'm like, hey.
It's like you're smuggling in Hitler, like the religious type smuggle in Jesus.
You're going to start with NGO figures, and before we know it, it's Auschwitz. That's what they think.
Right.
But
always negative.
The shortcut solution to answering almost every single one of these problems is assume that your interlocutor has good motives. Yeah. Assume that they are being honest in the way that they're looking at it. And that's why I say...
have a comment about that. Okay, so this is something I deal with in my clinical practice all the time. Okay, so imagine that you're naive. And then what you are when you're naive is someone who thinks you trust people because you think everybody has good motivations, which is some sense what Douglas is recommending. And they say, well, that's just naive. It's like, just wait a second, though. Because here's the developmental pathway. First, you're naive and you trust everyone, and then someone cuts you off at the knees, or multiple people do, or maybe you cut yourself off at the knees because you trusted yourself too much.
You
and
wake
didn't
up.
take into account the malevolence that lurks in your heart and the hearts of others.
True.
And so that you get traumatized by betrayal, and then you become cynical. And you think, Jesus, I'm a lot smarter now that I'm cynical. And you are, because cynical is actually a move up on naive. But it's not the last move. The last move is to transcend cynicism and to say that even though I know that there are just as many snakes in your heart as there are in my heart, I'm going to hold out my hand in trust because that's the best way to elevate both of us.
That is so freaking beautiful. For those that have followed me, I'm sure you have heard what I did for my wife. For those that don't, I always said to find a good woman, you need to put your heart out there and see how they treat your heart. And it might be painful, but it's a slow purpose, a slippery slope for the goodness to find a better person. And sometimes things go a little rough. I'm like an entrepreneur trying to get that job that I always wanted. But just like people that want to save these people, you have to do the same. It's a slow build up. But the idea that they want to see it in a way, I want to see it in my face to be sure it's working, it's so slow, nothing really gets done. And suddenly, well, we need to allow illegal immigration because it's going too slow. I can see it getting solved, but it makes me feel good if I just know they are coming over.
And that is the prerequisite for a sensible discussion.
And to concede that, this is why I'm always going on about Aristotle on this, to concede that it's not between good and evil, but between competing virtues. That when it comes to something like the borders discussion, you're dealing with justice and mercy. You cannot only be driven by one
Yes,
of those
that's right,
virtues.
that's right.
Mercy
Both.
itself will lead you to hell.
Yep.
Justice on its own, blind,
Yes.
unseeing, can lead you to hell.
Yes.
I can remove this eye. That's justice. This is the real me. Let's go. You can see that I don't have one eye. But mercy, let's put this because I want to look like all the other people with two eyes. It's a beautiful thing. But guess what? The amount of time I walk to go to the metro, to go to work or whatever, I don't see people. People think I see them and I bone so many times against them and I get so many angry looks. That's my point. With mercy, with justice helping refugees, the side object you're creating sometimes can be very negative. But at least when you're justice, we can see it. When you're mercy, you always obfuscate it in certain ways that makes no sense. And that's why it's so troublesome, because you gaslight people like I'm doing something great. I'm like, you can do so much greater, but you don't trust the people that gave you the money so you can help them the right way. No. You want to help them your way.
Devido a tua iniciativa, padrei ku indica e também que sum sativa. Te ainda não quer aceitar ku eta medicina, Bob di nang di eta causa rebeldia.